In this mentoring moment, I want to talk about the truth that we all have a shadow side. Now, you know you have a shadow if you walk out in a parking lot on a sunny day. You can see your shadow, right? But most of the time, we aren't aware of the shadow side of our life. So the shadow side of our life is like that part that is human. It's a combination of maybe life's past experiences, our motives and values. It's perhaps our woundedness showing through. It's the humanity we bring into our ministry, and we all have it, right? Sometimes we don't see our shadow when other people do. Sometimes our shadow seems very long, and sometimes it seems short. So I want to talk about the shadow side of ministry. And if you don't think you have one, here's a tip. Just ask your spouse or ask a good friend if you do, and they'll help you with that very quickly. But our shadow side is something that we need to face. And here's a couple things that can help us, maybe clues to kind of look and see our shadow side. And one of them would be how busy are you? How fast are you traveling through life? Sometimes I really felt like I was skipping or skimming. I'm like a boat going across the top of the waves and just kind of bouncing. I'm not settling deep. I'm not lasting long. And I could find it perhaps in my conversations with people. I would be quick to the point. Instead of taking time maybe to see how they're doing or relax into the conversation, I wasn't always a good listener. I had things I wanted to say, things I wanted to do, and I would get in and get out of relationships. And to be honestly, people sometimes felt used and that I was skimming through life. So a question about your shadow side might be how fast are you going? Are you over the limit regularly? What would other people say about how fast you walk through the lobby of your building, or how quickly you get in and out of relationship and conversation with your kids or your spouse or your staff? Good questions for us. Another thing about our shadow side is really to check our motivations. Why do we do what we do? Maybe we're even doing the right thing sometimes, but for the wrong reason. Do we want our church to grow? Of course we do. We want our church to grow. But do we want it to grow because it makes us feel good about what we're doing, or because we can say to others, I lead a growing church, or so that we can be able to have a sense of accomplishment? Or are we growing because we really want people to become more like Jesus and bear fruit that lasts? I know we would all say, yeah, that's what we want. But I'm going to be honest with you. At times, I also found my shadow side creeping in ways that I didn't always realize it. And I know this is true because there would be times people would confront me with things and would ask me questions, and I might actually feel hurt or defensive from those. And I would begin to say, well, of course that's not it. And I would defend myself. But even in being defensive, or even in being protective, and I'm not going to say every criticism is valid, but what I will say is you can look at every criticism to see why a person said what they said. So a second clue would be check your defensiveness. How humble are you? How approachable are you? How easy is it for other people to give you feedback in life? And when you can receive that feedback, you can process it and give it back to God and sit before Him with an open heart and an open mind, then you can decide whether there's something valid in there that you can take from that, or whether you just simply need to say, I'm going to set that aside for later and see how many times that comes up. And if it comes up often, then you look at it again. So how fast are you going through life? What are your motivations? And then the third thing I would say about your shadow side is, would you be willing to honestly and vulnerably be open to God and others? And to others, I would say there needs to be people in your life that you can allow to ask you the hard questions. And you trust their motivation in doing so. You're willing to listen, you're willing to learn. Your spouse probably should be one, but there also should be some friends and perhaps a counselor in your life where people can talk to you about things you might not see. And this part that perhaps is behind us. We can't always see our backside, right? So invite people to talk about that. And then pray the prayer that David prayed before God. Lord, search me and try me and see if there be any wicked way in me. And then be willing to sit quietly before God, listening for the answer, maybe with your journal open. I found that many times when I do that, it isn't like I hear something immediately, but later in the day, I often do have something drop in that I think that came from God. And so regularly when we humbly sit before him and just say, God, teach me and lead me, we are doing what we need to do to deal with the shadow side of life. And I found this last little thing I'll say is, when you're right under the sun, you have a very small shadow. And the more we are directly in line with the sun, S-O-N, the less shadow side we had. But people will help you with this if you'll let them.